Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Savage's 1984 album Tonight. So Savage is a Italo-Disco producer. I have a soft spot for Italo-Disco, and really, I mean, pretty much all forms of dance music in some ways, and especially 80s music. In probably 82, 83, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I started to hear like early electro. Growing up in Los Angeles, you heard things like, Ice-T and Knights of the Jaguar and Planet Rock came out, and you know what I mean. There was so much great like electro, and of course it was tied with like break dancing music, and um, I wasn't really into breakdancing music, but I liked the music, and there was so many good like one hit wonders that were sort of in the breakdancing music. Everything from like, well, not really Nucleus, because Nucleus was one of the better ones, but Freeze's IOU, or even Rocket, Herbie Hancock. You know what I mean? There was so many like really good dance tracks, but also during that time you also had freestyle music, and which freestyle music was really popular in Los Angeles because of the Latin community that you grew up around, and the radio stations out there. So you had stuff like Trinier and Debbie Deb and Latin Rascals and I mean, all the way up through the middle '80s. Like even Madonna was freestyle when she first came out. That was kind of post disco in 1984. Madonna was doing freestyle music, but it went all the way through the '80s, like Expose, and all the way into the early '90s, like Lisa Stansfield and Taylor Dane and Jody Watley and you know uh, Lisa and the Cult Jam and stuff. There's just so many like Kathy Dennis. You know what I mean? There's just so many great songs through that freestyle music of like '83 to 91 roughly. And then also you have some really strong Italo disco music, that's Italo house and Italo disco music that sort of changed around 82, 83, 84, was kind of coming out of disco, and kind of Italian music kind of carried on that tradition, and kudos to them for doing that, and sort of carried that disco sound into a sort of proto house music, but also almost like an Italian version of freestyle music, and Italo house, Italo disco went into Italo house and went through the early '90s, even into like Italo, like a ambient house, and also inspired by rave music, and even some, you know, there's quite a few labels that I followed through the early '90s that were Italian based, and so there was just those early styles of electro, and even funk in there as well, but also Italo disco, Italo house, and then also freestyle music. Those three styles are very much super important for the growth of dance music through the '80s into the '90s. I don't know where EDM music or whatever you follow when it comes out. I don't really call it EDM music. I call it dance music or electronic music. Like, I have a big issue with EDM, the term EDM, and I could give that into a rant video sometime. But the music of the '90s and dance music going forward, when it comes into like house music and techno and all the forms of dance music, owe a lot to the early '80s electro, Italo disco, and freestyle music, because they were the ones that really kind of bridged it from disco music to what we know today as generally as house music and techno music. But yeah, Savage was one of the in my opinion, one of the a lot of them, maybe had like one or two songs, maybe three songs that sort of, if they had three or four songs, they were probably a veteran when it came to them, because there was a lot of one hit wonders, and the style of music of Italo disco doesn't necessarily have, a lot of it sounds similar to each other's, and unfortunately for that time didn't really progress to the point where there was some sounds like, like I can think of like Cybertronics, um, international, was it International Music? I can't think of the IMS, International Music System, I think it was called, with Cybernetic Love. That was a classic track in '82, '83. If you know it, you know it. That's just a classic Italo-Disco track. Just for that, for example, like even IMS had like 3 or 4 tracks, so they're considered like almost like a mainstay, or at least they were talented enough to make a full album enough of the style of music. And then sort of by then it was, 86, 87, a lot of things changed, and they sort of fell by the wayside, or what have you. But not a lot of artists made it past having a song or two or being popular through the course of a couple of years. And Savage, for the most part, he was able to at least attain a steady career, which is saying something for a lot of artists that didn't really get past even a popular single. And he did this debut album in 1984, and thought I'd review it because what the heck, right? I like Italo-Disco music, but this is going to be kind of a short review. I don't have a lot to say. There's not a lot of depth to the album. There's not a lot of songs on here. There's only 7 tracks on here. He had some big hits with "Don't Cry Tonight," the track "Tonight," and also "Radio." Those are kind of the 3 singles from this album, and the 3 tracks he's probably most known for. They were played on the radio, and he played a lot throughout his performing career. Even to now, they're highly regarded underground tracks for disco Italo compilations, and just anybody who looks back in that period, they're going to kind of run into these tracks, and because they're classics. I really like Italo-Disco a lot more than disco music. Like disco music, like I respect, I grew up with, and there's certainly a lot of like unknown tracks in disco that were very important for taking the disco sound and sort of extending it into being longer tracks and deeper tracks, and not your 3-4 minute your popular disco tracks. And everybody for the most part points to "I Feel Love" by Donna Summer is kind of like, and of course Giorgio Moroder, and as kind of a great example of one of the first tracks that really kind of elongated a track and made them 8, 9, 10 minute forays into how to extend a disco track. And so I really respect disco for that, but Italo-Disco is a little bit more I like it more because the melodies, it's a little bit more electronic than disco. And then, although I really enjoy the strings of disco, and I do very much appreciate that for the most part it's a true band playing the music and it's not just somebody playing keyboard. But I do like electronic music more. I mean, that's kind of what I really, really grew up on. So, I tend to be more on the Italo-Disco side than the disco side because the melodies, it's a little bit more dancey. The beats are a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper. They're using the Linn drum machine, maybe even some 808 machines. They're experimenting a little bit more. Dub versions started to come out, and remix versions started to come out, and they had extended versions. And that, of course, tied to the remixes that a lot of producers would do of tracks like this and make them 12-inch records. So just the overall of that, as that sort of evolved from 1978 to like 83, 84, like that's the reasons why I like Italo-Disco and Italo House more so than disco. But there's only 7 tracks on here, so it's a fairly short album. The first track, "Radio," is my personal favorite on here. I do have "Don't Cry Tonight" rated as a higher track, but Radio is my personal favorite on here. It's so simple, and so the keyboard works so well. I really like the spacey sounds, the way he sings it, the hook of the track. It's just really catchy. It's very minimal. It's really kind of it's nice because a lot of Italo-Disco can sort of verge into being like high energy, not really high energy disco, not to that extent, but it kind of being a little bit on the faster BPMs and faster, more energetic tracks. And the cool thing about Savage and some of the lower BPM Italo-Disco stuff is it has a little bit more of a funk in there and a little bit more of a groove in there. And this is a great example. Like these are very, for the most part, these are very low BPM tracks. You know, when it comes to Italo-Disco, and I think in some respect it works really well with a track like Radio. That it's this that's excuse me, that's this slow. But I give Radio 3.5 tracks. Excuse me. I Love Again is a strong track as well. I give it 3 stars. Fugitive is probably my least favorite on here. I give it 2 stars. Tonight, solid, really good track, 3 stars. Only You, 2.25 tracks. You know, kind of not bad, but not great there. Turn Around, 2.75 stars, and then the title or the track he's most known for, Don't Cry Tonight, 3.75 stars. I think it's the most. I think Radio is my personal favorite, but I do think Don't Cry Tonight is the more solid track, the more well polished, the more well rounded track. Like Radio kind of sits in the groove, and I really like that because it's a little bit more atmospheric, a little bit maybe not as poppy, a little bit more edgy. It has the spacey sounds are really cool on it. The way he sings on it is really cool. Don't Cry Tonight is probably the more catchy version, and I do have that one rated higher because I do think it's an overall better track, but I do really like Radio better for me. Only 7 tracks on here. When I add up the tracks, it's 20.25 tracks. Divided by 7 is the 2.89. You know, that puts it around like a 60, 68 or so. I do take it down some points. I do think it's a good album for sure, but I can't really say it's on the high end of good, close to very good, because there's only 7 tracks on here. So I deducted it a few points, but I still think it's a good album for sure. 63 out of 100. Yeah, I just kind of, you know, it's 7 tracks for an album, you know, and then, you know, I just kind of, I don't know, I just feel that it's you have to deduct a few points, and if I think it's on the high side of good with my scoring per track, but there's only 7 tracks, I feel like that kind of takes it down like a half a notch. Not a full notch from good to pretty good, but at least higher good to lower good. I think that's understandable considering there's only 7 tracks. But really, again, I think Savage is one of the more solid Italo-Disco albums from that time. You do have 7 real strong tracks, you know, and 4 of the 7 I have rated very good. So, considering like what I was saying earlier about an artist from Italo-Disco having 3-4 good tracks, that's you know, on the higher side, because there was so many like artists that just had 1 or 2 good tracks and you never heard from them again. That was just kind of the times changing, and that small window of like 1982 to like 84 in Italo-Disco, where something like this would be made, and maybe even into 85, but that was kind of, you're kind of pushing it by 86, still doing Italo-Disco. You know, it kind of moved into Italo house and just straightforward dance music. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Savage's debut album, Tonight from 1984. Curious if you like any Savage tracks, or do you remember dancing to any of these tracks? That would be a good one. But yeah, just if you have any thoughts on Savage as an artist, um, feel free to leave some notes in the comments. If you want to if you don't know Savage and you're curious, check out Savage radio performance or live performance of the track Radio on, I think it's on like some channel. It'll probably be one of the first ones that come up. But I think it's kind of cool his like performance when he's got the radio and he's all dramatic, and that's how it was in the Italo-Disco. It was kind of disco, sort of verging on futuristic music, futuristic style of disco, and sort of coming into techno. And I think it was a great. I mean, there's a lot of great things about the '80s, but I find it really, really cool that a lot of these fairly basic dance songs made the charts, were top 10 songs in countries. And considering like a lot of the top 10, in 1984 in America, I don't know, it would be top 10 in 84, you know, things like REO Speedwagon and, stuff like that. Like, I think it's really kind of cool that something like this was probably a top 10 song in a country. It just makes me kind of like, I wish I was in that country instead of having to hear some of the radio that we had in America, listening to like Styx and stuff like that. Ugh. But yeah, that's my thought. That's my overall on Savage's album tonight. 63 out of 100. All right, thanks so much. Have a good day.